I know both of us have heard so many stories about how people left the cult, what their exit strategy was, what their regrets were. But one thing that's in common, every single story has in common, is I've never heard anyone say, "Man, I just really wish I'd stayed in longer." That's my biggest regret. I wish I'd stayed longer, started more Bible studies, gone out in service more. What a missed opportunity.
Just placed a few more magazines.
Hello and welcome to Difficult Childhood. This is the podcast where we talk about growing up as Jehovah's Witnesses and the process of breaking free and ultimately the rewarding experience that can be had in life, just everyday life outside of the organization. I'm joined by my lifelong friend,
Okay.
Fallon, and as per usual, it's just us chatting here. What are we talking about today,
Just
Fallon?
us.
Yeah,
We're the whole thing. We're Pat Sajak and Vanna White. We're the whole deal.
yeah, I'm Vanna.
So yeah, we try to pick a different topic. And this week we're gonna kind of touch on regrets. Um, we're gonna say 50% regrets, 50% hindsight. Maybe things that you would do differently as far as your exit process or waking up or just your time within the organization if you knew then what you know now, or things maybe you wish you could change. Not that we're trying to have a pity party, but sometimes it helps to work through those things, or maybe just find people that are within your peer group that maybe had similar experiences. Kind of helps clear out the mental clutter, I think.
Oh, absolutely, I agree.
What do you think?
And I know we talked a little bit that, last time that we were going to cover this. And yeah, you're right. You don't want to wallow, but I think that can be cathartic to talk with, and hear other friends talk. And of course, as we're sharing ideas here, we'd like to hear your comments back if you've left or if you're in the process of leaving, what you'd already like to do differently. Yeah, how knowing, I'm repeating you, knowing what you now know, how would things change?
Yeah.
And I think that has real value because we can learn from other people's experiences, and we'd really like to hear yours. Other people, yours too, though. We'll cut that out.
So did you have one specific you wanted to start with, just off the top of your head, or?
Well, I yes, I did. I thought about this because I know we had talked on the phone and said, let's kind of think about this in advance. And this isn't just off the cuff, but I think my number one regret for leaving in the way that I left the religion was that I wasn't honest. And this is something that I want to say, like, there's a big caveat here for other people, because other people may have children, they may have, custody issues, they could lose their family, they could lose their children to the
Right.
cult if they just, flip a switch and take off. And I didn't have that
Right.
issue. So everybody's situation is different, but I didn't have that issue. But I was still absolutely petrified of losing my family, my parents, my siblings. We were all very close, and I
Sure.
knew it wasn't the truth anymore. So I thought, oh gosh, I have to hide this from them. And in doing so, I really undermined my own position. I just flat out lied to them. They asked if I was dating someone. I lied about that. They asked if I was, going to the meetings. I'd lie about that. I just get cliff notes of what happened, and then talk as if I knew. So, and then of course my dad in particular would ask me what my thoughts were on the teachings. I would lie about that too. But in doing all that, trying to keep them happy, keep them placated, I ended up really, the thought is that Satan is the father of the lie. And as you can see from the screen, I'm an atheist. We've said that about 73 times. But if you lie to someone and they are Jehovah's Witnesses and you're in the process of leaving, well, they think that your whole life is lying. You're just trying to deceive
Right.
them. So whenever I try to share something that is a fact about the organization or about their beliefs that I was trying to help them, I was dismissed out of hand because I'd already lied to them so much. I lost all credibility.
Right. You undermined yourself, basically.
Hmm. Yeah. So that was, I think, for my particular situation. And this is because my livelihood doesn't depend on them. I live in the same state
Right.
as them. I don't work for Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't have, kids that I'm trying to get out. Like I said, I don't have all these other situations that may require just not showing your cards. And there's certainly, you know, Jehovah's Witnesses don't have right to information on you. You're allowed to go live your life
Right.
and just decline to share information.
And I think a part of that, I mean, I've obviously known you for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, generally speaking, you're not a dishonest person. So, I mean, I think a lot of that is just a mixture of, like you said, fear, panic, really, not even just fear, but like panic. Um, and almost like a survival instinct takes over,
Oh yeah.
because you can't imagine your life totally separated from your family. So even though lying or omission is wrong, you just feel like, well, what other option is there? And also, since they're not going to listen to facts, because they view it all as like propaganda,
Yeah.
you just feel like, well, what are my other options?
Exactly. Um, and I know for a fact that if I lose my family, I don't die. But I also believe, from my point of view, that humans are very much evolved to think that they're going to die if they lose their village, because we've always lived in these small groups, and we have to have our small group. If you leave them, there's wolves out there in them woods. So I had that feeling very, very seriously that I was going to die. And of course, that's what the organization uses. It makes it so that if people become a Christian like yourself who does not support the organization, the cult, you also are shunned. If you become an atheist like myself, you should be shunned just because neither of us agree with them. And so that trick, it took me a while to realize why I was so panic stricken about that. And from my point of view, that's what it is that it is a thing that's just ingrained from generations upon generations. And you don't even have to go that far back. You could go a couple hundred years back, and you're pretty well screwed if you live up in Canada and you get kicked out of your group. You're done. It doesn't.
Right.
You could be in in my case, go back a couple of centuries, and you go back to Ireland, and yeah, you've kind of had it if you got to live among the rocks there, and you can't go back to your village. So it was something that I had to learn, that I was being too hard on myself about, because I was terrified. But also, on to the other point, that lying ruins relationships. And so now I don't. I have a real serious policy about being honest, even though it creates short-term uncomfortable conversations. And I'm more honest than
Agreed.
I ever was as one of Jehovah's Witnesses now, because you're in a relationship and one of you is lying, you've had it. And that goes for friendships, for family, for intimate partner relationships, anything. You're done if you're not telling the truth. And it's not because of shame. That can do it for some people, but it is because of the fact that the other person just doesn't know what's going on. That's just a practical thing. When the other person doesn't know how you genuinely feel, then they cannot trust anything. And of course, humans are terrible at lying because you have to track everything. So when you start lying, it adds up, and you have to make sure that all your lies match up with the future. It is so much easier, to be honest, and I am so much happier now that I'm out and actually genuine with people. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a burden off your
Oh
shoulders.
yeah. I think that was my number one. It's certainly not my only one, but what about you? What kind of experience did you have there?
Well, I thought of like three or four things, in no particular order. The first thing for me and so many other people in our age group that I've talked to, as far as regrets or resentment, maybe, it's just the time, just the loss of time, years, decades, for a lot of people. And, you can't get it back. And it's infuriating. You just feel really cheated.
Oh wow, yeah.
And I think for me, now granted, I compared to some, I left fairly youngish, in my mid 30s. Um, but I mean, I read and hear stories all the time of people in their, 50s, 60s, 70s, mid 70s, um, just one day, just realizing like this is not ringing true for me anymore. Um, so I mean, compared to some, yeah, I
Yeah.
still have a lot of life ahead of me. But still, I mean, you just think of, I could be this much farther along in my family, this much farther along in my career, or, goals, bucket list,
Yeah.
whatever, my spiritual life, or whatever. You just kind of feel like you're that kid that failed the grade and got left behind. You're trying to catch up. I'll just share like a quick personal story. My younger brother, he was 5 years younger than me. He also was raised in the organization. And as a teenager and young adult, he really battled like some mental health issues, bipolar depression, pretty severe. And he had been outside of the organization for several years. And I was still kind of like on the fringe. I didn't necessarily believe it, but I wanted to keep my parents happy, kind of like yourself. So one day I was having a discussion with him, and he was talking about my parents, and he said, I know they love me. He said, but I feel like they can't separate the love that they have for me just for being their son, for no other reason, just that, they're my blood. I'm just their son, and that's enough. I feel like they can't separate that love from them loving me in the hopes of pulling me back into the organization. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm explaining
Absolutely,
it right.
that makes complete sense. Wow, that's rough.
Yeah, he felt like they loved him only to the capacity that they could re-indoctrinate him, or that if they loved him enough in the right way, it would, make him want to come back. Like it wasn't enough for him to just be their child.
Wow.
Son. He wasn't a child, but he was their child.
Yeah.
And at the time, I, of course, was like, that's not true. They, you're enough just the way you are. Like they love you. And I mean, I tried to kind of dispel that idea, but I wish I would have handled it different, because fast forward a few years, my brother passed away in 2015. And then after that, I myself left the organization. And it wasn't until I was at odds with my parents about the organization that I really understood what he was saying. Because it was me that they were loving because they wanted to bring me back. Now, my parents, both very kind-hearted people, and I'm not saying that they don't love me, but I feel like, based on their actions, that a large portion of that love orbits around the idea of me returning, because they're willing to take the love that they feel for me as my parents and put it on a shelf because the organization tells them that's what's required, because I left.
Yeah.
We've gone through several years at a time, like not speaking. We didn't speak for almost 2 years. And then when my younger brother did die, they kind of like got over it a little bit. Not that our relationship was ever
got
the
over
same.
the shunning of you, though, is what you're saying.
Right. Yeah. So I wish, knowing what I know now, I wish I would have, I don't know, told my brother something different.
Yeah.
Maybe I should have said, you know what, you're right. And that sucks and it's not fair. But I love you, whether you're a Jehovah's Witness or a Baptist or an atheist or a Buddhist or a scientist or whatever. Like I love you just as you are. I'll probably always have some of that regret.
Yeah. I can understand that. That's, well, to the extent that wow. Yeah. What an interesting thing, because it is, first of all, very much a very good thing to hear. I'm sorry. That sucks. That's rough. That's the worst. That must be really hard. That is a great thing to hear. But I, on the other hand, don't ever remember a moment of unkindness from you to your brother, and I saw a lot of interaction. So, but yeah, and how about this? I'm sorry, that sucks. To have had to go through that, to remember that, and wish you'd done it differently. Yeah, yeah, he was a sweet kid.
He was a cool dude, and we were close overall. We were good friends, besides siblings. So that's definitely something that I'll probably always carry with me to a degree. But I like to think that I don't know. I'd like to think he'd be proud of where we're at now.
Yeah, I think he would be very much so. He struck me as someone who, if he had made it past the issues that are very common to younger people, that a lot of people don't make it past, that he would have really figured his situation out, figured his life out, and sorted things out.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Well, that's all right. I'll bleep that out.
Sorry.
As long as I'm swearing. God. Well. Yeah. It is. Huh. I think that's a good share. Thank you.
Yeah.
What else do you think? You have your little list.
I do.
No, I appreciate
another thing. Another thing that
I love you, buddy.
For me, I love you too. Another thing for me. So I was married before, and my husband was a witness, of course. So kind of talked about that before. Something that I regret now is that we chose not to have children when we were younger. And that was directly influenced by the organization. They obviously never said, don't have kids verbatim. Yeah. But they talked about, we're so close to the time of the end. Our focus should really be on staying distraction free, using all our free time to support the ministry, the organization, the expansion, the growth, the movement, whatever. And my first husband was very charismatic. He was a salesman, basically. Everybody liked him. And so many elders said, you guys should apply for Bethel. You're perfect. You would fit in perfect there. You don't have any children. That's such a plus. They talked about how so many good couples had to leave Bethel after they got pregnant. They said, there's definitely room for you. They could use you. Like you're just perfect. And we've talked before about how I'm a perfectionist type personality. So we were like, yeah, like we don't want to have kids. This world's going to end any day now anyway. So we just never did. And we both really felt like that was not something that we wanted. So fast forward many years, by the time that I realized that I really would have liked to have had children, I was much older. I was remarried. My whole life was just different. My career was much more demanding, and not that I couldn't have had them, but the ideal time for me to have had them was long gone. Mm-hmm. So I just have a lot of regret about that because, number one, kids are great most of the time. And I just feel like if I had grown up in an atmosphere that really valued the family unit enduring with or without the organization, I maybe would have wanted to create my own family unit. I would have, I guess, valued it more and taken advantage of it when I had the chance. So yeah, I have a lot of regret about that too.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Now, thankfully, I will add a caveat. I have 2 stepchildren now. They're grown adults, but between the 2 of my stepchildren, I have 7 grandchildren, and they're amazing, and they keep me busy all the time. So I don't know that I have the energy to have a child of my own. But I should have when I could have.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like you would have been really good at it. I I enjoy kids too, and I think there are parts of it where I go, yeah, that's fun. I have my garage downstairs that opens out to the alleyway where all the kids play, and every year I'm making my own Halloween props and stuff, and they come over and they ask how things work, and you can explaining teaching a kid how something works or how to do something, or that's cool.
Yeah,
It's fun. I love it. It's a good vibe.
it is fun.
Why are you making a
Yeah.
monster in your garage? It's fun. Um, yeah, I had my another regret that was kind of similar to what you just said there about you regarding a spouse anyway. But my spouse Rebecca, we went to the international convention in 2009. Maybe I mentioned this before, but we were sitting there at the convention and there was the BMW Motorworks plant across the way, and there was the beer garden, and there was off in the distance, there was Neuschwanstein Castle, and there's all this cool stuff to see. And we're sitting there at the international convention listening to stuff be piped into our brains that we've heard a trillion times and is not interesting and has a delay when you hear it in German and in English. And it was unbelievable. And Rebecca, my wife, was ahead of the game. She's a little bit smarter than me on that one. She was like, even a couple of years before this, like, this doesn't seem right. And she just asked me flat out in the middle of the convention, should we just go on our vacation and let's just drive down to Italy and have a vacation? And instead of spending
Right.
all this money on a hotel that's a really crazy high rate and a bunch of other tours that are a crazy high rate that's profiting for the organization. I mean, she didn't say all that part, but we're sitting at this international convention that's a cash cow for the cult instead of going to Italy and hanging out in some cheap little cute villa and enjoying each other's company and moving on with our lives. But I do remember a specific point where she said, can't you just come on, take my hand, let's go, it's okay. Your parents will get it. My parents were there at the international. They'll get over it too.
Left foot, right foot. Just start moving.
Come on, buddy boy. She was so supportive, and I'm like, no, we shouldn't. And she's like, you're right, okay. And I'm like, crap. So all these years later, I think this is 2009, like I said. So I was 29 years old, and I didn't wake up until I was, fully until I was 38. So I was like, oh my goodness, there's nearly a decade. Admittedly, it's led to some good places for everybody, but yeah, there's those little moments where you go, I was so close to waking up early. And kind of a side note, I know you're really used to dealing with my ADHD here, but we acknowledge that some people have to exit carefully with a strategy. I've literally heard so many, perhaps hundreds of people be interviewed on different channels on YouTube or just talking to me. I've never, ever heard anyone say, man, I wish I had stayed in for a little while longer. That's never been something that's said. Right.
Just placed a few more magazines.
Right. Oh gosh. It's like I hear I saw on Instagram this morning, I wish I'd you never hear anybody say, I wish I'd spent less time with my dog, leave as soon as you possibly can and you won't regret it. I think that's what I took away from that. And finally, eventually did take action, and now things are much better. But yeah, no regrets.
Yeah, again, just goes back to like the time,
Yeah, where you're at, and it also pertaining to the family and trying to wake them up as well. I at the time didn't realize that you can't wake people up that don't want to be woken up.
Preach, brother.
Oh man, you cannot. And I was just speaking with someone the other day who was talking about her brother, who is still very much indoctrinated. And she said, so I sent him a couple things. And I'm like, those aren't going to do anything if he's truly indoctrinated. So they won't touch the server. He has to want to himself. And so just stepping back myself from trying to share information with people and just going, okay, they'll come to me or to the other right person or the right person for them when they're ready. And that's been consistent. Like,
if we've learned anything from Kevin Costner and Field of Dreams,
have we?
If you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
Yeah. True.
Sounds like a marquee for an orgy.
You send up the bat signal like, hey. Nope, cut that out.
Just, cut that out.
But yeah, people seek you out when they're ready.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And also, this is something I was going to ask you if you wanted to do, but I got permission from someone to give a little shout out to somebody because They
Yeah.
are leaving, and they have taken the action that needed to be taken. This was Charlotte from Arizona. She reached out to me on Instagram, and a friend of a friend, and she has managed to uh, get away from an adoptive family who are Jehovah's Witnesses, abusive family situation where they're trying to control her life
Ay, ay,
and her
ay.
finances. And she said she left with a bag about the size, a Walmart plastic bag, she said, with the stuff that she could fit in that, left everything else behind. And
Shit.
more importantly, she said, I don't regret it. Now, she had to take some practical steps.
Wow.
She was like, she found
Sure.
out a situation where there was somebody who was also an ex JW, and she's able to stay with them for a little while till she gets on her feet in the new town. So good for you, Charlotte. Good for you. I'm
Yeah,
usually
we're
looking at
proud of you,
Fallon's
babe.
face, but I'm going to switch to the camera. Good for you. So proud of you.
Yes,
That
that's
wasn't easy,
exciting.
and that's so exciting. Love
To quote my granddaughter, yes, queen.
it.
It's what the kids say now. We're we're really proud of you. That's exciting, and I know it's scary, but
Yeah.
it's your life's just about to change in all the best possible ways. So
Absolutely. And
proud of you.
even though financially things are difficult and other things are a huge challenge, she's already seeing that her life is improving. But that
Yeah.
fear of losing her family kept her back. I believe she said for years, and now she's glad she's finally taken that jump. And I said finally that's not fair because she's taken it exactly when she needed to, when she was ready to. And trusting yourself was not something that the organization encourages. To trust in yourself and your own instincts. And
Independent thinking, dangerous.
Absolutely not. No. So anyway, awesome, Charlotte. Yeah, you. But
That's what I'm talking about.
I love that stuff. And if anybody wants to direct message us, what their experience has been, as if we can, we'd love to share it too. We're obviously a super little channel, so pretty high chance we can.
Super small, but super cool.
Yeah, right.
And I think sometimes when you're going through that process, you maybe don't have a safety net on the outside, and you don't have somebody to tell you like we're proud of you, but we are proud of you, even if it's just little teeny tiny baby steps to unshackle yourself from that organization. We're proud of you, and you should be proud of you too.
Absolutely. Another thing she mentioned to me was that she was struck by how unbelievably kind, quote, worldly people are. They're deeply
Imagine
concerned
that.
and they care and they want you to have a better experience, and they'll help people who they don't even have the remotest connection to. Altruism in the world
Yeah.
is absolutely amazing. And in fact, as much as Jehovah's Witnesses and family members teach, who are Jehovah's Witnesses teach, the world's full of terrible people. It is generally projection. They're usually projecting their point of view that everybody's terrible, but it's really that cult thinking that's making them behave like terrible people.
Yeah, the divide between us and them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't believe it. It's not real. There's some rough people out there. Be careful, but the vast majority are just genuinely kind people who are glad to lend a hand.
Yeah. I read an interesting quote today from Lucille Ball, one of my faves.
She did some
was actually talking
cool.
about the subject of she was talking about the subject of regret, and she said, "I'd rather regret the things that I've done than regret the things that I haven't done." And I just love that just simple little phrase because, I mean, of the two,
Yeah,
it's better to take the chance, and even if you get burned a little bit, or even if it's a tough season of life when you first get out, it does get better. So if you've made your mind up, I encourage you to strike while the iron's hot, because you can't get that time back. Something else that I thought about that I regret. I think back about how judgmental I was about everything. People in the organization, people outside the organization. I didn't realize it at the time, but I had this like kind of puffed up like self-righteous idea that, because I was in the only true religion, that I was just automatically right about everything. And I think back to people that I know I was not kind to, or I judged too harshly without knowing, their whole circumstances or their life story. Uh, Specifically, I think of like my ex brother-in-law and sister-in-law. They were struggling with just different issues, and I don't want to say I purposely would like belittle them, but I just remember internally thinking like, I'm way up here and they're way down there, and
Get
that was
together,
just
guys.
so
Vibe.
awful.
Yeah.
And yeah, and in the moment, I mean, I really felt like, well, I'm judging them according to righteous standards, so it's okay. And it's horrible now. I think about it, and it's just so embarrassing to think that, I had the nerve to call myself a Christian and then act like that, because I guarantee you nobody was seeing Christ in me when I was that way.
Yeah.
And I try to make a concentrated effort now to, know the whole story and to not judge, because it's, number one, probably none of my business. And number two, it's not my place to judge either way, even if it is my business.
Yeah.
My job is to love people and support people. And that's how you share the love of Christ, not by bringing the hammer down on somebody because they're not living up to what your expectations are.
Yeah.
So I wish I'd been kinder. Sorry.
That's interesting. You do say, like, I remember getting that from both of my parents, just when somebody was having a problem in the congregation or they weren't showing up. There was just this real condescending attitude. They're not, they're, well, what do you think? And, I've heard my mother refer to people as, just kind of trashy, or something like these are like other Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah, okay, she's not real good at cleaning her house. Be nice, it's or just like this attitude that um that you're better than people who aren't doing as well spiritually. Like I remember my uncle saying once
Yeah.
in the car while we're on our way to the meeting, he remember him saying, "Worldly people are so stupid." And I remember at the time I was like 20, thinking, "What? Aren't you supposed to be like nice to these people? Aren't you supposed to be preaching to them door to door to recommend your lifestyle and your way of life and your choices?" The false humility, fake humble condescension of true believer Jehovah's Witnesses is yikes. It's serious.
Thick.
It's
real thick.
thick. Yeah, that's what it is.
And it's embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
It's embarrassing when you look back on it. It's like, oh my God, like I can't believe I was that way. I would be mortified if someone treated me that way.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, I mean, you don't even realize it because most of the people around you behave the same way or so similarly.
Yeah, that's crazy. The arrogance. There's particularly, I think we mentioned it before, the arrogance of a JW man, which I experienced firsthand. Just being that, oh my goodness, we were a condescending lot. Oh my God.
You're so lucky with your Y chromosome.
It's amazing. Like I just go around explaining things to people. Everybody just, I can buy like furniture without calling my husband or wife or whatever. I don't know. It's amazing. I can just walk around town and people listen to me. 5'8", and I don't really know that much, but they seem to take me seriously.
They do. Definitely do.
Oh, geez. I have a regret. I didn't organize my office today. I'm not going to turn the camera that way.
Why do you think all you ever see in my videos is just this wall and this window and this Michael Parks painting? Because that's all that's fit to see.
Michael Parks painting.
So.
I think there is just like one rectangle. Like literally, if you go ha 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 ha, oh my God.
One thing that I use the word a lot, and it bothers me.
I noticed I was
one
too.
Thing that I just do. Yeah. I don't realize it until I watch myself back on the video, and then I think, oh, geez. Spit it out, Fallon. Uh, there it is again. One thing that jumps out to me, as far, not necessarily a regret, but if I knew then what I know now, um, I guess I felt like because I was kind of fading rather than just cut and dry, that somehow my parents would be less upset. It wasn't like I came to them one day and I said, I don't want to be a part of this religion anymore because I don't think it's true.
Mhm.
So I'm washing my hands of you. I just, went to less and less meetings and, just kind of trickled off into the background. And I thought that they would just slowly adapt and everything would be copacetic. And that is not what happened. So knowing what I know now, if I now could tell Fallon back then, they're going to shun you regardless. Whether you just, guillotine style and cut it off, or you fade off gradually over many, many months or years, they're going to be mad. And they're going to say a lot of hurtful things, and they're going to shun you regardless. If I knew that, I probably would just rip the Band-Aid off and just save myself those last few years where I was like on the fringe and trying to make everybody happy. And that was really when my mental health was just the most fragile.
Yeah.
Because I just felt like I had so many irons in the fire and trying to start my new life and hang on to my old life and make people happy. And, just spoiler alert, they're going to shun you anyway.
They will.
I
If
would
they
tell my
are
old self
true
to
adherents.
just. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
If they aren't,
Old
I mean, you
school.
might have one of those sideline families that's like, oh, it's okay. I've seen that happen, but if they are going to all the meetings, it's really unlikely.
Few and far between.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, my parents were like, we never watched an R-rated movie. I've never heard my dad use a word of profanity. Never.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's wanted to, but
Yeah.
I've never heard him. Yeah, just very, like boomer generation, just really hardcore about it all.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if you grew up with parents that were more relaxed along the way, then at the end, when you tried to leave, they might have not been as confrontational, but that was not the case.
I give you a complete agreement on that. My parents, because our parents were, I don't know if we've said this really clearly before, but both of our sets of parents were very close friends. In fact, our mothers were best friends until your mother passed away.
Yeah.
And literally besties. They called each other every day. They're since the mid 80s. And so both sets of parents had the kind of the same standards is what I'm saying. And they know R-rated movies.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, those are the same sets. And I put so much effort into trying to keep them. And it was ultimately completely a waste of effort.
And I think it's important to realize that, if unfortunately you are in the situation where you do have to, part ways, that's their choosing. You're not forcing that decision upon anyone. When I had my last kind of big blow up with my parents, specifically my dad, I told him, I said, I'm the same Fallon that I have always been. I'm a normal person. And I said, and one day, when you're old and sick and feeble, I will take care of you because that's what I choose. That's my responsibility. I said, you might not want my help and that's okay, but I'm not going to let what you do dictate what I do.
That's brilliantly said. I love that. I really, yeah, it's such a huge waste of energy. And that was one of the things that the organization teaches people is that they can control others. So my actions can result in a different outcome from another person. That's not the situation at all. It's taken me a while to learn I can't control what other people do or think. All I can control is this end of it. Now it's time for a top 3. Leaving the organization, knowing what you now know, what would you do differently? Go, Fallon.
I would say number 3, I would just be clear with my intentions rather than beating around the bush. Number two, I would just be less fearful. I would not waste so much of my emotional battery on fear. And then number one, I guess, just kind of like I said, I wouldn't waste so many years on the fringe trying to make everybody happy. I would just rip the Band-Aid off and just say, this isn't for me, and make my exit.
Absolutely. Nice. I'd say my top three. Number three, I listen to other people who are not inside the organization, or listen to other people who have something to say that isn't in line with what the organization says, because my ex-wife was telling me things that were useful bits of information, but I was blocking her because we have to stick in, we have to keep family, we have to focus. And so even when she was making really good points, I was making excuses and doing JW apologetics. So I would listen to your wife as long as she wants you to leave a cult. That's what I would say. Number two, I would say really the same thing you said, is I would pull the Band-Aid off, because I can't control what my family does. And even now, my mother, maybe 6 months ago, said, well, when you left us and the organization, I didn't leave you. I left your religion. I've never left you. I've extended so many olive branches, and the last 10 olive branches that I've extended to you, you lit on fire and wrote in the sand the word no in ashes. That was like the level of from them and from multiple members of the family. So I cannot convince them, and I would have just moved on with my life sooner. But I also, that knowledge makes me aware that it is a process. So be patient with yourself while you're going through the process. If you can't do it right now, that's okay. You'll get there. And the number one thing has got to be honesty. I specifically remember a conversation with my mother when she asked me something and I gave her completely false information. And as a result, I lost all credibility for trying to help her realize that she wasn't trying to push the truth on me. She was trying to push something false on me. So I lost the moral high ground with being dishonest, even though I was just trying to keep my family. So I think that's the number one thing, is be honest. And if that doesn't mean you owe people information. Just don't share. If I'm not comfortable sharing that with you, is a thing it's okay to say.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they push you around trying to think. There's a common thread among elders and parents, even when you're in your 30s, 40s, is I am owed information. What are you talking about? You're not.
Yeah, anytime you speak with an elder behind closed doors, especially, the expectation is that if you are asked a question on any subject, that you will give an open answer. And if you don't, then, you're withholding, you're being like coercive, you're being combative. Clearly you have something to cover up. You're trying to hide something, and you may have nothing to hide, but it's nobody's business. Not every aspect of your life is, meant to be displayed before. They're just men. Plot twist. Yep. The elders they're just men. They're just men.
Dudes who wash windows, and it's okay. They don't have any real power. Okay, well, this has been difficult childhood. We're talking about how it is to wake up, and then also the benefits, how much better life is. Fallon, do you think that life is better outside?
It's really hard to enumerate the ways that it's so much better.
So a bit. Do you think worldly people are bad?
Not all of them.
No.
I mean, I'm not gonna say that, every person out there is excited to see you escape or succeed, but by far, at least in my situation, the networks and connections and friends that I've made on the outside have been so kind and so compassionate and so excited to see me succeed and just live a normal life, just a normal, happy life.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's great.
It is great. And in closing, in support of what you just said, just people that are a lot, there's always a small group of people that just really don't care, but there's people like my friend Stacy, who lives in Canada, and she just today, she's never been one of Jehovah's Witnesses. She watches this. And then today she sent me this week, a bunch of subreddits about people's experiences waking up. She's like, maybe this will help. Maybe this angle will be
Yeah.
interesting. And she's just so invested and interested in seeing people live their best life. And there are genuinely
Yeah.
sweet people like that out there. So
Yeah.
stay strong.
Hi, Stace.
Hello, Stacy. All right. Thanks so much for listening. And bye, friends. Bye, friend.
So anyway, I came out blasted.
Exactly.